Well, hello, and welcome or welcome back to the Curious Coaches Lemonade Stand. Always a pleasure to have you here. I'm your host, Dr. Gina, and I really want to thank you. So grateful that you've taken that precious time, this moment out of your day to be here with us in your friendly neighborhood virtual third space where you can always drop by and find a new way that we take life's lemons and turn it into some delicious lemonade. So, hope that you'll find something today that's going to give you a cup of great thirst quenching refreshment. I am very pleased and honored to have today our lovely guest joining us from all the way down in Oakland, California. Please welcome with me, Cheryl Wilson.
Thank you so much for having me. The thought of being part of a lemonade stand makes me think of children who are excited about something like I'm excited about doing this. So I appreciate the name and the way it's
Thank you.
comforting to lemonade. So I'm really glad to be here. And the main reason is that I've been an educator for over 28 years. And I did retire in 2020. However, because children are so near and dear to my heart, and I can't resist even being around babies, if you can imagine. I can't resist thinking about, as an educator, what might I do differently? What have I learned so that my passion and my purpose has always been to make sure that children get their needs met so that whatever talent and strengths that they have can be can be they can see themselves as unstoppable. So that's always been in my heart.
Mhm.
And anyway, so in 28 years, first I became an educator because I was have a background in theater and I was working with you, if you can believe this, 4 and 5 year olds because their parents wanted them to learn commercial acting. So I'm in front of these little, and maybe I've had about 7 or 8 students. And so I say to them, say teacher loves you because you're special. And of course they repeat the same way. I say, no, teacher loves you. And this one little girl, if you can believe it, but kids when they're 4 or 5 years old, so many inches tall. And when I said that, she said, I know special. And I was taken aback. I said, oh, yes, you are. You got those pretty little bows in your hair. I know pretty. And
Wow.
that was the impetus. I have a tendency to be impulsive. However, this was an impulsive move that paid off throughout my career.
Hmm.
That's when I decided I was going to become a teacher. And throughout my career, working with first graders, working with fifth graders, working with teachers, doing professional development, being an instructor on the college level, and later becoming a person who coached and helped people who wanted to get their administrative credentials. I worked in that capacity as well.
Hmm.
However, throughout that time, I've always grappled with the idea of how do we help children learn when they have what they call those their ACEs. You have whatever trauma in your life. You show up
Mm.
to school and you're already dysregulated. And
Mm.
unfortunately, I responded too many times, not so much as a teacher, but as a principal using punishment. I I resisted punishing students or using suspension. However, either you are on the side of the teacher who wants that child out of their classroom, or you're on the side of the child. And being on the side of the child and not recognizing what is the unmet need that
Mm.
caused this child to misbehave is something just a huge dilemma. And
Yeah.
so ended up writing about my journey as a principal, and since that time, like I said, retired in 2020, as opposed to sitting by the beach and reading, no, I took a course about how children learn, which is not something we teach children, and I also became a roving sub, my best do nothing job. Anybody who's a principal or educator, become a roving sub because I didn't have to go to meetings. I didn't do lesson plans. I wasn't in charge of the school, but I could really bond with middle school students. And I bonded mostly with those who were on the spectrum or who had special
Mhm.
needs. But
Uh-huh.
during that time, I remember being in one classroom and it was before the election, and I encouraged the students to talk about the popular vote as opposed to electoral college. And I
Uh-huh.
wanted a great debate. And this one really studious girl, eighth grade, raised her hand and she said, Miss Wilson, can we just go through the PowerPoint so I can get my point? And I looked at the students and, what was I going to do? So my point is that I always was driven to help children become their better self.
Mm,
I learned as a principal too often times we use punishment. When I became this roving sub, it was down to understanding that school is so much about doing an assignment, doing some homework, turning in some work, doing the assessment. And if you're not too much of a behavior problem, like I saw many of the eighth graders be promoted to high school, you are promoted. And so
mm,
that really hurt my heart because I recognized many of them didn't have executive functioning. And so from
mm.
there, learning about executive functioning somehow, whatever you want to say, I was moved by whatever spiritualness, what happens in my life. But anyway, that's when I took a course on positive discipline. And boy, did that turn my world around. I didn't have children as a teacher or principal, but now I am a caregiver. And I've been in this role for 3 years of a young, wonderful young boy who's now 12. And he has learning challenges. I was able to navigate in his IEP and also attention deficit. Now, what I learned when I wrote my book is that I have a tendency to control. Yes, I was a wonderful teacher, but it's like, this is what we're going to do. And you're not going to leave
Mm.
here without doing any work. And so, with this child who has attention deficit, I can't tell you how many mistakes I made in terms of lecturing, controlling, taking over his problem, not really listening.
What a whole new piece of self-awareness for you on that journey.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, anybody write a book because what I realized that much of that comes from my childhood, but that's
Mm,
a whole nother story. My point is that dedicated educator wanting to do the best didn't realize how much school, especially in middle school, pressures students to achieve for grades but not to learn. And then thinking I wanted to work with parents because many of these low achieving students, they came in from elementary low achieving, went into middle school, and what do you think is going to happen with them in high school? And the
yeah.
parents are so excited because they see them promoted, but they don't know they can barely read or do math. And so that's when I thought about executive function. Some of these students never had a backpack, there's no bedtime, there's no routine, but so on and so forth.
Wow.
W-
Yeah.
We tend to parent the way we were parented. And so
Mm,
many parents send their child to school and, you're just going to be okay. However, before I can convince a parent to recognize that they need a bedtime, they need to have a backpack that's placed somewhere. They need
wow.
to be able to know chores so that they can understand they have a responsibility to learn
Yes.
more or in terms of life skills. But before a parent, especially who was raised with punishment and maybe just sent to school, before they can take that leap to support their child in that area, they need to be able to communicate. And I had read
Mhm.
that like 67% of the reason uh, partners or couples separate or get a divorce is because of lack of communication skills. They argue, they fight, everybody wants to be heard, but they don't know how to listen. And so,
Yes.
in terms of positive discipline, what I want parents to think about is that I know I've heard that your child is like your heart outside your body. And when you
Yes.
are being a parent, what I would want them to begin to think about is first of all, if I've got this heart outside my body, and I am a parent who knows that discipline is done through being firm and kind, then my heart is beating steadily. But if I am a parent who, way I was parent, it was the one way I knew how to get what I wanted if I did a
Right.
tantrum, or I never, the control of myself was wishy-washy. Me, maybe I had a bedtime, maybe my parent was stable, maybe my parent wasn't, or my parent got angry. They just let me do what I wanted to do. And so my heart is just jumping around. It's not stable. And then
Mhm.
if I'm a parent who, like some parents, you do what I say do. You better listen the first time. I
Right.
told you this, I told you that. Go to your room. So if I'm a parent who has to have control, then that heart is stressed.
Yeah.
And so
That's a
what I
constant friction there. Yeah.
yeah, so what I want parents to understand that you're not to blame. And many parents feel like, it worked for me. However, is it working for your child? If you on a daily basis are arguing, or you feel like you're in a lecture, or you feel like your child is so disrespectful, they don't do anything the first time, then what's going on is the same thing, I guess, what you would do with your partner, or if you go to your job. If you go to
Yeah.
your job and their way of helping you do better is by making you feel worse, how does that
Well,
happen?
this is it. This is it. Like as a professional coach, when if a parent were to say, "Well, it worked for me," I immediately I've got a red light going off. I want to challenge that. Excuse me. Tell me about how that's worked for you, because there's something that's playing out in the way that you are trying to exert that same control that was exerted over you, and it's not working out. So where's the evidence that it worked for you? And how is it that that's going to be the path that you choose forward for? I love the way you capture that metaphor of your beating heart outside of you. Like as a parent, that really resonated for me. So it's a moment to really stop and question it. And it takes me back to something you said earlier on, Cheryl, when you said the unmet needs of these kids. I think that's something that I become very focused on when thinking about discipline. And when you just talked about the parents that you're dealing with, immediately what jumps to mind is what are your unmet needs as the parent? Because
Oh,
I feel like it often starts there to even begin to recognize, to ask the question, what are my child's unmet needs?
so in going back to where you're in a relationship with someone and you argue and fight, and you have unmet needs, but what they talk about, what's above the surface and what's below the surface.
Right.
So if I'm arguing, or if I'm arguing, I bring in the groceries and nobody helps me and I start screaming and
Mhm.
shouting, my unmet need is that you take me for granted.
Mhm.
So in communication, what I want them to know of their child, first you have to learn how to attack the problem and not the person.
Yeah.
And so that requires compassionate listening.
Mhm.
If when your child is doing whatever, it's a teenager or it's different with a toddler, it's because they haven't learned how to get that need met yet. And so, say, for example, with the young boy that I work with, well, I have to admit honestly that there's times when I thought I was going to pull the hairs out of his nose if he forgot his backpack again, or we spent 5 hours doing his homework and he didn't do it. However, what I've learned is that he has a problem. And when he has a problem in terms of forgetting his assignment, or not being able to write things down or keep track of it, it is I am supporting him to
Mhm.
solve that problem. I am being firm, I'm being kind, but it comes down to when we look at the problem, for example, he kept losing this paper. The paper had the requirements for assignment that was going to be
Okay.
due let's say it's Monday, but he kept forgetting it. And I said, sweetie, what do you need to do? How can you remember to get those instructions? Because the assignment is due on Friday.
Mhm.
And sometimes it takes him a long time to think, but he thought about it and he said, well, if you call me in the morning before I go to social studies, I'll remember to ask for it. And he did. And see,
Mhm.
what it comes down to is that you can't a person who has an unmet need, you
Mhm.
can't change them, you can't make them be what they want, what you can't make them get that unmet need, the need to be belong, the feeling of belonging and significant. You can't get to that by punishing them or not
Yeah.
listening to or not validating how they
Or
feel.
assuming you know what that unmet need even is, to mention how
And
to
so
address it.
the one idea again, attack the problem, not the person. So we attack the problem and teaching him to solve it. And so
Mhm.
the other piece is when when I used to make mistakes before, I'm lecturing him, and you can see his whole body language.
Yeah.
Just his head goes down. And so the idea is that when your child walks in, or they're slamming the door, whatever, you try to make a connection. It
Mm.
looks like that you're something must have happened. something I don't know. You want to talk about it? So you
Mhm.
make a connection. You validate what they're doing or what you're seeing before you start correction.
Yeah.
And correction doesn't mean like if a child is or I don't know, maybe my second grade, my first grader who kept hitting kids out on the playground. And this is an example where I didn't know what to do. So
Mhm.
I told him, I said, okay, I want you to sit down and think about what you need to do differently before you go outside. And he sat down and then he came to me and he said, I think, I think if I'm going to hit somebody and I think if they look like they're going to tell the teacher, I think I won't do it. Well, see, he's in first grade, he doesn't have two front teeth. So he says, think. And the issue is that the unmet need is that maybe he was being bullied outside.
Could be.
Maybe he felt he needed some power. And so as opposed to telling a 6-year-old, what do you think you need to do differently? No, what it is that when you're outside or when you've come back in and children are saying you hit them and you hurt them, what do you think's going on? How does that feel when you are hitting or what can you what can you do? Because they're hurt, you're hurt, what can you do? And
Mm.
so it's validating that something's going on, but
Mhm.
me as the and what's happened with Nicholas, the young boy that I work with, my stress, I can tell you if parents don't get anything, it takes so much pressure and stress off of you if you stop owning and trying to correct their problem and help them become problem solvers. And
Mm.
so
Mm.
again,
Maybe
with this
teach
struggle
them how to fish?
yes, because then they own the problem, and the
Yes.
issue with punishment, like this little boy, he was he figured that, "Okay, I still wanna get my need met, I just need to do it another way."
Yeah.
And so punishment may relieve a problem for a little bit, but oftentimes it has a long-term effect because it doesn't address the unmet need and it doesn't change the behavior. And oftentimes it causes people to rebel or to become revengeful or to retreat. And
Mm.
so, like I said, if anything with parents in terms of punishment, just understanding that when you use whippings or excessive times out at timeout or excessive, you're gonna lose your phone, you're gonna do this, and you're teaching your child that the way to change their behavior is through external control. I have to be punished. I
Mm.
have to go through this before I change, and they're not changing. And that child comes to school. Now, I can't spank them. I can't put them in timeout for a week on end. I'm going to try to teach them to problem solve. And if they haven't had that experience of people really validating their feelings or trying to help them unpack the problem, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And so I I don't want to blame parents. I don't want to say that what you're doing is really wrong and you're bad. It's what you might have learned and maybe you thought had worked for you, but it really causes a lot of friction when your child is relying on you to control their behavior. And they
Yes.
haven't understood that they have feelings that need to be validated. They haven't understood that I I just really want to be seen. I really want to feel significant. So when you are on the phone or when you don't have any time for me and I start to act out,
Yeah.
I'm trying to say to you is that see me, please be a part of me. Or when they're coming and they're depressed and why are you looking like that? I mean, if that's your response to the child is thinking they don't know. Or
Yeah.
maybe they know, but your role is to be seen and not heard. And so
Mm.
the lack of communication, which as parents take anything, again, you use connection before you start to correct, attack the problem and not the person, and
Mhm.
most of all, to resist reacting with anger and lecture and learn to stop, to breathe, to tell yourself, how am I feeling? How is what I am feeling? Am I able to communicate? Do I need to take the time out? And then how can I get centered in terms of my nervous system
Yeah.
so I can help my child who is feeling this and so, and we can work on this problem together.
So is
Again,
it fair to say that most of your work is with the parents as opposed to with the kids, or do you tend to work with both at the same time? Because it seems like a lot of, I guess, front end work has to be done with the parents to help them regulate, to help them become perhaps
yes,
more self-aware.
yes,
Explain to them what active listening is and how to do it and what it looks like. I mean, when you mentioned the body language, that very much resonates with me. So much of this does, as especially as a coach who is grounded in Adlerian psychology, which is about taking
yeah,
ownership and
absolutely.
accountability for
Yes,
yourself. This
yes.
resonates so much for me. So when you're starting from that point with them, it's I can imagine how your background in things like coaching, even in things like theater, the moments of improv would be really helpful and supportive in you working with these parents. So what is it like to do that? And do you encounter resistance from them, and how do you work with that?
Oh, I have to say, too, I made many mistakes in the past because I get, for example, this young boy, gosh, he's being raised by an elder, and it's easier to do things for children than to teach them how to do it.
Oh,
And so
100%. Just like employees. That's why I find so much of this is on track with talking about leadership, in a workspace as well.
and so we've gone through. I've learned to accept him first of all, and his and whatever you want to call him, adequacies or whatever else. And so me being patient with him and demonstrating because I do have this, three-way relationship on how it works with his child. As he sees
Mhm.
his child progress, then it gets more a clear understanding of what he can do differently on a gradual basis. Now, in
Right.
working with parents, it is putting parents in that child and that adult or parent perspective. So when you say to your child or when your child says, "I just I can't do it. I tried hard." And you as a parent say, "You need to try harder. You
Oh
haven't
my
put enough."
goodness.
How does that feel? If you're that
Yeah.
child, what are you feeling and thinking and deciding to do? So having parents do those types of role plays, and then more importantly, because like I mentioned to you before, I'm just passionate about children.
Mm,
I believe that to make sure or to provide a cushion, I would have to be also be working with the parent and the child. I don't want the parent to feel that I don't want the parent to feel that I tried this, I tried that, it didn't work. Because change has to happen with them before they can really transfer it to an ongoing basis with their child. It has to become a habit of mind. And so
mm,
for
mhm,
me, it's also understanding the dynamic of the relationship. How does that child perceive him or herself, or they perceive themselves with their parent? Does
mm,
that child feel like that they can talk to their parent? Does that child feel like they are ever able to be heard? And so before that relationship can happen where you are building on trying to increase or improve your communication skills, there would be I initiate kind of a family meeting where people take turns. You would usually begin with affirmation and they're not false affirmations, not like you did good, but but when you got up this morning, you got dressed already, I that just makes our lives so much easier. I appreciate you for that.
mm,
Just putting on the table, what problem are we trying to solve? Because I know parents, it's like if you knew better, you do better. I know parents want their child to have compassion. I believe it to to grow up and be able to understand the perspectives of other people, to be respectful, to know how to guide their behavior depending on the situation, to be open, to be resilient. But if everything comes to a point of argument, name calling, punishment, they're not going to get those skills. And
Right.
so with the parent, also in terms of their own relationship with their partner or whomever they're with, it's practice. And so you really, in order to change this behavior, you need a community. And I would encourage parents, okay, when we do family meetings with your child, you have a partner, you've got an aunt, a relative, somebody that
Hmm.
you can have a further community with, so that when you're working on this, you don't feel in isolation. And
Yes.
then, like I said, I'm not a person who is going to say, "Okay, we've done this 6-week training. It's been really nice. Thank you." No, it's an ongoing relationship.
That's exactly where I wanted to ask you is, how do you sustain this when you've made those changes? What does that sustainment piece look like for parents and for the kids involved?
For me, it has to be, well, first of all, I'm one person, and I I I have a pact with God to say, "Just give me 20 parents." Because it's more so I'm fortunate, I'm retired. It's not like, oh my gosh, I gotta make $1 million. This is my goal. If you can give me 20 parents that we can either just, whether it's coaching once a month or on call. However, I know, I mean, again, I've been an educator for 28 years. Look how long it took me to recognize this is the behavior that I wanted to change. And so
Mm,
even with me, I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly working with, my one child, the 12-year-old. And really, it's beginning with parents, maybe just how do you have a conversation with your child? Like
yeah.
like the other day, there's, in terms of education, it's like 12 roadblocks to communication. And so the other day, we were riding the car, and I've learned to have conversations like, well, if you were a leader, what would you do? Or what's the favorite memory that you have? Or we're talking about ice skating and roller skating. And he's saying, well, I don't know why, but I can ice skate better than I can roller skate. And so
Mhm.
my initial response, I had to stop myself because I was going to say, "Oh, yeah, of course you can do." You know what I'm saying? Oh, of course you can do both. You can. I'm taking over. I'm not
Yeah.
validating what he's saying, and I caught myself, and I said, "Oh God, I remember it was easier for me to roller skate than it was to ice skate." So we get into conversation.
Right.
And I have this whole list of questions. I carry them with me so that we can get to know each other. Where do you see yourselves in 10 years? Or when you're at school, who do you decide who's going to be a good friend? It's just conversation. And I saw
Mhm.
something, there is a good reference. It's called Understood, I think understood.org. It has everything you need in terms of trying to grapple with being a parent.
Mm,
There's one thing that I think I saw, it's like 777. 7 minutes. 7 minutes maybe in the morning
mhm.
where you're bonding with your child. 7 minutes when they come home from school or whatever, when it's just a conversation, and 7 minutes before you go to bed. And so,
Mm.
like I said,
With
I know
undivided attention, right? Parents, put your phone down. No checking that one quick email that you've been waiting on all day on your laptop. None of that. You really need to give them that full presence for that 777.
yeah, just go. And so even though it's hard, and I know people are working 2 jobs, I know they're stressed out, I know that they have their own needs, they want a life, but come on, 7 minutes. Let's set the timer. This is our time. If you have to,
Mhm.
777. At least, maybe just starting there. Starting there, having conversations with your child, having family meetings, and to again learn to, even with your partner, anybody at work, attack the problem, stop attacking the person.
Yep.
Also, try
That's
to
a good strong starting point to remember.
validating where a person is, that connection before you do a correction, and then resisting wanting to react. Whatever goes on inside your body, you need to be able to calm down so that you can respond with compassion and care.
Mhm.
Those are the big things. And of course, it's 777. 777, probably with everybody that you're close to in your life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good guidance spot. Well, Cheryl, I'm learning so much. I'm curious, is there a particular instance, a particular child or parent where it really sticks in your memory because it was a big challenge and it just felt like a deeply well-earned success when you move the needle with that particular parent and child dynamic?
I'm still there's there is a parent I am working on, a young parent. Well, not particularly young. And it's just learning to have her to feel like she can listen because she wants answers, and
Mm,
to slow her down and to help her just pause before she responds, to slow her down to recognize that it's okay to not have all the answers. Stop trying to jump to a conclusion. Okay, I'm going to do this. Oh yeah, I'm going to try that. Just to slow down.
have the patience for the process in yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, because parents, we all wanted, you want the best for your child. You want to do well, and you want to come up with a quick fix, a solution. Okay, I'm going to try this, or I did this. So it's really getting her to slow down, to getting her to think about this is your child. This is not your friend. Getting
Mm,
her to think about you want to do differently than your parents did. And so how are we going to unpack that issue so that you can go forward and you can nurture your child as a child and not your friend, and not go into that relationship, continue it as if you have all the answers. You want to do well, but you're not parenting. You are not, you're being permissive and not so much controlling, but just getting her to pause and trying to coach her to listen, trying to coach her to build a more positive, collaborative relationship whereby, like I said, not doing everything to entertain the child, but like I said, it's gotten better.
mm,
It's gotten better because she does listen. It's gotten better because her child is seeing her more as an adult caregiver as opposed to a friend. It's gotten better because she has learned that there are skills her child needs, such as chores, such as self management, how to take care of himself, which she's helping with. So it's cooking with him, it is buying literature, spending time to read, it is trying to have boundaries, but not in a controlling manner. And like I said, it's a slow process because her upbringing didn't provide that.
right.
And so, and then let me see, there are other, gosh, I think of parents working in terms of school and helping them see their child as an individual as opposed to as an extension of themselves that they have to mold and they want to duplicate,
Yeah.
and like I said, it's challenging, but it's worth it. And it's day to day, and it has to be on the forefront of your mind so that you don't go back to what you always did. It
Hmm.
has to be like in the
Hard
book,
to override the default.
yeah, it has to be like when I do my 7 minutes with my child, I do this and it makes me feel better.
Mm,
When, when when I stop and I don't react through lecturing or controlling or punishing, then I reward myself. Maybe I have a glass of wine. It's like I said, in the habits book, it is in order to have something become a habit.
yeah.
Sometimes it's not, maybe there's a carrot, but when my child does this, I don't necessarily use I don't necessarily use praise or rewards. I use affirmations. When they feel good, I feel good. And
Mm,
that's kind of the bottom line because the more you have your stress, the more that you are dysregulated, you're passing that on to your
yeah.
child, you're passing it, you're not able to see clearly, and so maybe it's parents or anybody. You have maybe I don't know if affirmations work for everybody, but it is, can I give myself 7 minutes
Mm,
in the morning? This is what I want my day to feel like. This is what I want to do to make
set
sure I
that attention,
made it.
definitely.
Yeah. And so again, it begins with before I can help you become a better person, it's about me becoming the
Yes.
person I've always wanted to be. And when I think of parents, particularly, it is helping your child with just the basic life skills. The life skills that are going to challenge them throughout their lives. And so that's I talk about executive functioning. I talk about children having chores. I talk about with this young boy that I'm with. How do you navigate directions? How do you catch a bus? Gosh, how do you interact when you're in the theater? It's just really, like I said, it is life skills because oftentimes, like I said, the parent just sends their child out into the world and you've done the best you could, or they send them to school. And the problem, particularly at school, is that parents often complain to me, well, my child doesn't do that at home. Well, your child doesn't have to navigate 20, 40, 100 other students on a daily basis.
It's a
And
different
so
environment.
it
Well,
is. And
as I
mm,
s I was just gonna say, as you're saying all this and thinking about, what you're saying, sending them out into the world, is there, in your experience, a really, ideal time in a child's development and trajectory, whether it's at a certain age or grade point, for instance, that you find applying, positive discipline as a parent is most impactful? Like, is there a particular window or opening that you find, when I work with parents whose kids are of this age group or of this age group, it tends to work better, the changes are more easily facilitated, or does that not factor in? Is it really just sort of a case by case basis?
depending on the home environment, it could be a case by case basis. However, what I want parents to know is that you start today.
Mm,
Any behavior you want to change, you start today.
yeah.
And so with children, when they're toddlers, yeah, your language and how you guide them along, it's going to impact them when they're 5 or 6 or whatever else. Uh, Recognizing little kids, 2, 3 years old, they're watching you, they're learning
Mhm.
from you. Or like even when they're a baby, people get impatient, and I would say that, well, a baby would say, "If I could talk," I'm 6 months older, "If I could talk, I would say, 'I'm crying because my diaper is dirty and I wanna be fed.'" They can't talk. And so the
Right.
way they're communicating with you is to say, "This is what I need." And so even as parents, as opposed to saying they're a bad child or treating them like a bad child when they're in that up until that age of 5 years old, helping them learn to become who they are. And when they're having a tantrum, it's you're upset. You're upset. What we need to do, what mommy or whatever needs to do, I'm going to take a break. I love you, and you're going to take a break. But it
Mm,
is guiding them. It's not so much controlling them. It's not stop, do this and don't do this. Like the little
right.
girl that mentioned to you, when you got that much criticism in your life, then that's how you are. You're critical of others. You're 4 years old. And
And that's
so
what seems to be leaking out, I find too. That's the background script and coding in these parents' minds, perhaps the whole, well, that's how I was raised and that's how I'm going to do. Well, it didn't quite work quite the same way that you might have thought it did because you're exerting control in a way that you may have rationalized in your adult mind was good for you. However, if we could go back in time and visit your 13-year-old, your 6-year-old self, would they agree?
so even with the young boy that I'm a part-time caregiver for, we've done this for 30 years. And I started with him when he was like in the end of second grade, third grade. We've come a long way. It's required a lot of patience. And again, in
Mhm.
terms of positive discipline for him and grappling with, I know that there are parents who have their child. I have my child Monday through whatever Friday, and then they go to the other parent on the weekend. Those two different parenting styles,
Yeah.
that's a huge issue, and that's with
Huge,
me
yeah.
and the young boy. However, our conversations, my guidance, knowing I'm going to be there, knowing that I'm going to be there and help you solve your problem, knowing I'm going to model as much as I can
Becomes
what
even
is
more important, yeah.
yeah, because like I said, it was a challenge. I remember going into his classroom and realizing that for some reason he was allowed not to do anything in his math book for months. And I was livid because I was a teacher. That can't happen. However,
Mhm.
the issue is that he has a problem. His problem is that maybe he's never been taught how to study, or he has a problem, meaning that he doesn't have access, meaning he's a slow reader, meaning he doesn't know how to advocate for himself. And unpacking that problem. And then the other thing in terms of listening is that I mentioned to him, I said, I'm going to have a conference, over the phone, whatever, parent conference. And what is your teacher going to say? And what was really great in terms of this brief conversation is that he talked about math and where it's hard and he likes to read. And then he talks about focusing. He said, I blank out. I can't focus. And he
Mm,
said, I even blank out when I'm doing my art. And so that was like huge because
mm,
it means that this is a problem. You follow what I'm saying? And
yeah,
so he's been forgetful, and he identifies as an artist. So if he says, "I even blank out when I'm doing my art," that was a trigger for me that said,
yes.
"Oh, I took 1 months to get the ADHD diagnosis." However,
Mm,
it's like, okay, this is what's going on with him. And like I said, having those conversations, just a casual conversation, getting to know your child, just how they function,
just
how they
again, it comes back to that full body listening.
yeah. And so from there, like I said, getting the diagnosis and then working with the school to make sure he gets that's a whole nother thing that I would have to help parents navigating the classroom, navigating the school, making sure that
Mm,
your child's a 504 IEP or ADHD, how
right.
they are providing support services. But that seeing him recognize that I'm not crazy, I'm not a bad kid because I forget. I'm not. This is something we're working on.
That's
And so
huge.
it's
Yeah.
recognizing what's gotten really better when he comes in, he knows to get his laptop out. It took a long time for him to learn to do email, even though they expected to do email in 8th or 6th grade, but now a routine. And a
Mhm,
routine has happened because I am letting him take charge. I'm
mm,
not taking over. Sit down, do your homework. Here's the timer, do this. It is a routine. What is going to work for you? And
right.
so it's more of me
It's
as
his.
opposed to telling him what to do. It's asking, "How is
Right.
this going to work for you? How much time do you want to spend on this? Are you going to start with this one?" It's me asking. So he learns that he has control over his life and he can make decisions. And when he has a problem, it's going through the problem solving steps.
Yeah. That's
Something,
lifelong lesson right there.
yeah.
That's
But
huge.
again, it's a lot of patience. Like I said, I've been doing this with him for 3 years, and it's huge improvement because like I asked him, well, tell me, what would people say about you? And, anybody's probably going to give what you think somebody wants to hear. But his examples of the kind of person that he is, his examples of what friendships look like, his
Mhm,
examples of how to be respectful, that's good. And that
mhm,
I believe that comes from our relationship where I really strive to be open, really honest how I'm feeling, and really respectful, and really asking questions and being curious about who he is.
mhm.
And so, yeah, he talks a lot about a lot of stuff I don't get in terms of electronics, whatever, amatonics, but it is a relationship that you would want anybody who's a caregiver or a parent or even an educator, you would
You're
want
building trust. Yeah.
validating them,
Mhm.
letting them make sure that they are seen and that they are heard.
Absolutely. How has this this may be my wrapping up question, Cheryl, because the passion it's coming out everywhere. As you speak, it's very, very clear and evident. You demonstrate your passion for this subject area, for the people it impacts. How has the work that you've been doing, the learning that you've been doing, changed you as a person?
How long do we have? I will say to you, a teacher wrote about me in a book when my first years of being a principal. She wrote about the 8 principals, and I was one of the 2 that she wished hadn't left the school. And I never could figure out why these 8 principals, why are we so different? We
Mm,
all get educated, we do this, we do that. What happened? And that was the impetus for me to write my book. Now, when I wrote my book, that is when I had to look at why do I have such a need for control? And that
mm,
comes from not a lack of control within my own upbringing.
mm,
Why am I, to an extent, a people pleaser?
mm.
And so, really understanding before I could really understand why I did a lot for my staff. My teachers know I love them and whatever else, but it part of it was being a person who needed to have that. I don't know if I need to have that appreciation, but I like doing things for them. But it's also because when you grow up and you feel like an outsider of the family, because I even at the age of 7, I recognized my mom couldn't take care of me, and I asked to go live with her brother and his wife. And
Wow.
so when you are on the outside of a family, you want to be a good girl. So I'm a good girl, and to the extent probably a people pleaser, but like I said, the things that I did for them, I did them with my heart and the things I created. So knowing that helps me when I had to think about how in my staff meetings, I remember one of them, it was a horrible staff meeting because one teacher exploded at another, and
Oh.
I wasn't used to reprimanding adults.
Mm,
Now, I wouldn't allow that to happen with children, where we wouldn't have a conversation, but it is, I think, really understanding why I didn't respond, why I didn't take them to conflict resolution. I wasn't, I guess, I wanted to be seen as a very likable and a kind person,
mm,
but and I think that stems from, my childhood. So yeah, being a people pleaser because I'm with these families and they've got me, so I've got to be good. And then
yeah.
also, my mom's not taking control of my life. I need to take control. And so being in control, I ran my school, and I remember one teacher, she wanted to have another teacher come in as a guest teacher because she was going to be in maternity leave. I mean, she was returning from maternity leave, and she wanted to work with this one teacher. And I knew that the position was available. And so before she came back on, I found somebody. I was going to hire somebody because I take control. And later she said, I already have somebody. And see, again, in terms of parenting, if you are a person who was always maybe the firstborn child and you had to excel, and so that's what you want for your child. Or if you were maybe the middle child who was never heard or you never got any attention, those things that, like you said, it gets
Those are
registered.
unmet needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you are like that little 4-year-old girl who was criticized, who was told, killed. I think they say children hear no a million times in those first few years, but is criticized, who is, you make judgments about her, so she
Mm,
makes judgments about others. What is she going to be like when she goes to school? And so, but again, it's never too late to learn something new,
mhm.
and it's never too late to ask for help, to coaching you, to make whatever you wanna learn become a habit. Because, like you said,
Amen.
unfortunately, even with, with school, I'm frustrated with education because it's so much like those kids, just like those kids said, like the one girl, "I got my grade. It's about the grade." And even with, this young man I worked with in middle school, we spend 4 hours, 5 hours on assignment, and he gets a stamp back. He did it. He
Wow.
gets we got what, 17 out of 20. And so you and so in our society, it's about that quick fix. I did it,
Mhm.
but I did it, and what did I learn? And what am I gonna use? And what am I gonna implement? That's where things start to fall apart.
Yeah.
And that's what you mentioned earlier. How does it work with parents? Because if you want to change a habit, you need to be a part of the community. You need to have someone who is in your corner, and you need to be able to say it's okay to make mistakes, but mistakes help me learn because what I want for my child and myself is a growth mindset so I can keep going forward.
Yes. Oh, that's beautifully said. That was a perfect wrap. The growth mindset sounds like it's something you've taken with you throughout your life, and I think that is probably one of the most important things that you're conveying to both the parents and the kids that you're working with, is to stay open to that growth and ways to actually engage in it, and preparing them, and actually equipping them with things like the 777, like actual structures and processes to make it happen. Well, I'm going to go to that, beloved segment by a lot of folks who often will call me out. Thank you, viewers and listeners, if I don't do it. And I'm really grateful that Cheryl is very much amenable to checking this out today. So I'm going to draw us a tarot card to tie into the themes and discussion that we've been having today. I always use the Tarot of the Divine by Yoshi Yoshitani. It's a personal favorite of mine because it's inspired by deities and mythologies from around the world. So it has a very global flavor to it. So as always, shuffling on camera here. Never know what's going to come out, but the higher power gives us something every time that tends to work. So the card that's come out for today is the Knight of Swords. So the sword suite, I think it's very aligned, is about intellectual. It's the mind, the suite of the mind. So it's always about what are we thinking? How are we thinking of things? Knights are what is the court cards, and they are the movers. A knight card always signifies change. The Knight of Swords, in particular, is known as the fastest moving of all the knights. So he is the herald of fast moving change, and that sword that he wields is a sword of truth. I can see how this is greatly applicable to our conversation today. From what you've been sharing with us today, Cheryl, it sounds like the positive discipline process is that sort of truth for a parent who wants to sort of cut through the noise and charge forward and make a positive change, because the Knight of Swords tends to bring a positive change, one that is needed in a situation that sometimes people may have had blinders to, or there are other background, again, stories, coding that are getting in the way of getting to the truth of the matter that will actually create and facilitate that positive change and that quick, decisive, necessary movement forward. So I think that's a really nice, as I said, alignment to what you've been sharing with us about positive discipline. I can imagine as a parent, that's exactly what this may look like. If I came to you and said, I need help. I don't know how to make this change. I intellectually know it needs to happen, and I want it to happen quick, fast, and in a hurry. The Knight of Swords is exactly the knight that I would want at my disposal to help you with that. So that's his, I know you mentioned when we were chatting earlier, Cheryl, that you weren't familiar with tarot, and I hope that gives a little bit of background into how I use the cards. Again, it's sort of a channeling of intuition and the energies around, and it never fails to amaze me, never ceases, that it tends to be a really great mirror, an excellent reflection of the conversation that we've just had. And I think the energies are captured there. So it's, he's charging forward, and he's doing so with great clarity and success. And
Oh,
so
thank you so much. I'm charged.
you are. That's exactly it. If you,
I mean,
I'm not sure the Knight of Swords would be the charged up one. Yeah. So that's fabulous. I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule of, not relaxing by the beach retirement, like you said, but actually continuing your growth mindset and helping others to engage theirs to help their children have the best outcomes possible. I'm really, really appreciative of your time here today, Cheryl. I learned so much. I'm sure anyone who's tuned in has, and has gotten a good tall glass of refreshment because, that was really, you taking us through how to take the lemons in, I'm going to take that metaphor with me, that your outer heart, the heart that walks outside of your body, how to take the lemons that come into their life and actually help them make the lemonade. They're the ones at the stand. They're in charge of mixing that. And I think that's super powerful.
well, thank you so much. I can talk to you all day long. Have a great rest of the day. This is
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it so much.
Oh, very welcome. Until next time, everyone, please do be well. If you want to reach out, whether it's to inquire about coaching, as you know, I'm a professional executive and life coach, or whether it's about speaking engagements, or you want to just reach out and propose a topic for the show, or even propose yourself as a guest for something we can chat about, you can go to my website, drgina, drgena.ca, drgena.ca. You can find ways to contact me there. So thanks, everyone. And until next time, please do take care and be well.